thanks for coming, guys. And before I introduce the panel, we thought it might be helpful because there might be different ranges of knowledge in this room about the TV industry and how it works. How many people in here feel like you have a pretty good handle on how the industry is set up? So a lot of you. So in 30 seconds or so, or maybe a little longer than that, just to give you a general idea, there's this industry called the cable industry, which even people within the cable industry aren't sure whether they want to continue calling it the cable industry because it's gotten so big and now it includes so many different things. It includes the internet stuff, and at least on the distribution side of the business, people are getting into lots of stuff like business services and home security and automation. So the whole industry has kind of been changing and morphing over the last few years. But if you look at just the TV side of it, or just, I should say, what was traditionally considered the cable industry side of the business, you really have three main quadrants, just so everyone knows. And this is important for all of you who are looking to maybe get into this business because you're all going to have to decide which direction you want to go. They're very disparate directions. They're very different types of jobs in different sectors of the industry. There's the distribution side, which is just the Time Warner cables, the Comcasts of the world, the DirecTV, dishes, etc. If you go into that side of the business, you're not going to be working directly on content as much. You're going to be working more on maybe some technology stuff. You may be involved in regulatory affairs, dealing with the FCC or the government. Or you just may be a business person who's just looking at the operation of the business and trying to figure out how to make money and how to save money, mainly on all the technology that's out there deployed. If you go into there's the other sector, the other main sector of the business is the programmers. And I'm talking just about the traditional side right now, not the internet. The traditional linear TV side, as we call it, linear TV. The programmers, obviously, the MTVs of the world, the HBOs of the world, that's all the fun stuff and the talent and all that stuff and the shows. And that's a whole different path. You can go into marketing jobs there, you can go into creative jobs where you're actually involved with the shows, etc. Or you could be somebody on the actually picking the shows and listening to pitches and things like that. There's a lot of different areas, but there are also the traditional financial services areas and things like that. But that's a completely different kind of business, all based on advertising and ratings, or if you're HBO, it's based on your subscriber sort of reach. And increasingly, with both sides of those businesses, it's all the internet stuff and trying to deal with online video and competing with Netflix and everything like that, and becoming, in some cases, Netflix. I mean, a lot of people now are going OTT, basically refers to over the top, meaning you're going around the traditional channels. So there's a lot of different ways for you guys to come into the business, and that's kind of the good news, and there's a lot of opportunity, and the whole business, I think everyone would probably agree, is really looking for young blood, looking for people that have a new perspective. There are a lot of people who came from the traditional side who are kind of scrambling. There's a lot of this consolidation, there's a lot of mergers and consolidation. They're trying to figure out, like, how do I keep my value up? And in a lot of ways, those of you who may have no experience, you have more value to many of these companies than people who've been there 20, 30 years. I mean, that's a broad statement to make. It's not always true, but I mean, in a lot of ways it is. You're doing a lot more social media. There's a lot of things that people in their 20s understand about consumer behavior that some of the older people that work at these companies need help with. So you guys are all in a really good position coming into this business from any angle you decide to come in on. And so with that, just a brief overview of the basic business. And then there's the whole technology side, which I won't even get into. If you love technology, and there's all these vendors that do software and technology and hardware for the business, and you can get into that side of it too. So I guess let's just go down. Why don't you guys just each introduce yourselves, then I won't mangle the pronunciation of your names, which I tend to be famous for that. And just tell us, we wanted to sort of keep things going, but don't have a lot of time, so we don't want to get into the bios of everyone and what you do. Just give us a general sense of maybe your career path, just your name, title, company, a little bit about the company, your career path, and how you kind of got where you are. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty.
My name is Lauren de la Fuente, and I work for Boingo Wireless. I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications, and I'm not sure if you've ever been to an airport here and you've seen the Boingo bug come up when you wanted to get some Wi-Fi. So that's one of our businesses, but I have worked in traditional cable. I've worked at MTV, at A+E Networks. I launched a television channel called G4 about video gaming, rest in peace. And but so I loved television growing up, so I really wanted to be in TV. And I did that. I was lucky enough to be able to do that. And then I helped launch a business called Entertainer, which was an early Netflix. It was ahead of its time, and it went down in Web 1.0. But so my background is sort of a blend of media and technology. And I like to say, you know, when you talk about the cable business, my last, before here I was working at a place at E, and people would say they're in the entertainment business, and I think that's really old school. You really want to think about yourself that you're in the media business rather than even the cable business. Because that really is a wide swath of everything. So that's me.
Hi everyone, my name is Tiffany Lanham, and I work at Nickelodeon. I'm currently the Senior Manager of Consumer Insights, and I started off my career in kids. I started off in Atlanta working for Cartoon Network Adult Swim, and then after about 3 years moved to New York, where I worked at Food Network, HGTV, made a stop at BET, A&E, now at Nick. So I kind of like worked the spectrum in the traditional television landscape. I continued my career in research. I started off doing programming research, which is more analytical rating side. I'm really focused on reporting those daily ratings, which drives our business. And more recently, like when I was at A&E, I took on the consumer insights role, which encompasses really talking to our audience and understanding hey, what do you guys like about our programming? Where do we need to take our programming to the next level? Then we go out and do focus groups. Whenever we get a pitch, we go out and we test the actual idea for the show to see if it works with our brand. And so continuing that with Nickelodeon and in the kids space, which is different. But I enjoy it, and I think that for me, working in TV, it's been something that I necessarily kind of fell into. I always enjoyed entertainment. It was like a hobby of mine. And I think when I graduated school, I was working as a marketing assistant for AT&T, and something that I was not really that into. And after 6 months, I was able to transition out of that into my role in cartoon. So and I've been in TV ever since. And so I think like my drive and passion for the industry is kind of what how I was able to get into it, and then how I've been able to sustain and like grow my career.
Cool. Hi everybody, my name is Michael Maniaci. I'm Director of Programming and Development at DiGa, which is Tony DeSanto's production company. It's a full-service production company that does TV, film, and digital. I'm tasked with managing the current development slate as well as current programming. We do a bunch of unscripted and scripted projects that range to different amounts of buyers. We do Teen Wolf and Scream for MTV. We have a couple of comedy series currently about to launch on CMT and MTV2. I got my start in the business. I was very lucky. My last semester of college, I moved back home. I got a full-time internship on the Late Show with David Letterman in the production department, which was a crazy experience. It was a lot of fun. It was 5 days a week. It was unpaid. You put in the hours. You were doing 11-hour days. It was a lot of fun. In doing that, I didn't screw up, so that was good. That landed my first job with Worldwide Pants, which was David Letterman's production company, on, believe it or not, a documentary about kids running for political office in America. So picture 18-year-olds running for city council and mayor in major cities all across the country. And part of my job, and I didn't know what I was doing, it was a very low budget film. We had a director, and it was just myself kind of wrangling the production. My job was to find these kids that were running for office all across the country. So it was at a time when social media really wasn't huge yet, but Facebook was around. And it's not that I came up with a genius way of doing it. I just said, well, these kids must be having campaigns on their Facebook groups. So I found this hip-hop mogul in Memphis, Tennessee that was running for city council. And the director took sight of it, took me aboard on the production. We were simultaneously shooting on election day, 6 crews all over the country with 6 kids. So that was interesting because I didn't know it then, but I fell in love with the development process because of that. And it turned out that my experience there, and I jumped from all different types of production jobs, all over, scripted, unscripted, but that helped me land my first development job in a production company, where I was tasked with just pitching ideas, and that was my favorite part about it, taking a nugget of an idea, stretching it out, coming up with a concept, a format that you can pitch to networks and finding the talent associated with that idea and selling it. Midway through, I realized I love the selling part of it. I love pitching ideas. I love pitching the networks. I realized to become a better seller, I needed to become a buyer. So I went on the network side. I worked 2 years at CMT, in Viacom, in the development part, Country Music Television. Was producing a couple of shows there and established a great relationship with Tony, who we were actually producing the same comedy series we're working on now there, and he offered me a gig that I couldn't pass up. So that's how I got here.
Hi guys, my name is Amit Shah. I'm the SVP of Corporate Development and Strategy at A+E Networks. I've had a little bit of a circuitous path getting into the media industry because I started off out of college in investment banking, doing Latin America M&A at JP Morgan for a couple of years. And I did a 180-degree shift. I did Teach for America, where I taught second grade in Compton for a couple of years, and then went to business school. And I decided that I had a passion for the media industry, and I also had a passion for the business side. So a little bit on the sort of the other side of work. I ended up getting a non-paid internship at Fox Searchlight Pictures just to get my foot in the door, having not had any experience in the past. And you know, one of the ways that I got that was I was spending a lot of time just networking and sending out emails to alums and just anybody that'd be willing to take a meeting with me. I flew out to LA, rented a car, and just went for coffees and things like that. But it was a great experience. It helped me see that, okay, yeah, this is something I want to do longer term. I joined Fox Networks in LA doing strategy and business development there. It was a group that it was much more focused on acquisitions, M&A, so there's a lot of, probably don't even remember now, MySpace and IGN and some of those other places rolled up into Fox Interactive Media, but it was also a place that our group helped launch Hulu, which actually still is around. Ended up moving back to New York, to the East Coast, and I did some consulting work with one of the digital properties, IGN Entertainment, so it gave me a good feel for sort of, when I was out in San Francisco, so I was flying back and forth from New York to San Francisco for about 7 months, but it was nice to sort of get that exposure to a digital media company versus a traditional media company. I thought that gave me a little bit more of a broad perspective. And then I joined A&E about 5 years ago. I started off in content distribution, made the move to finance and doing financial planning and analysis, and really wasn't that excited about it, but I realized that it was an important skill set that was really important in understanding the operations of the business. And then just in early June, moved over to corporate development and strategy, which is a new role that was actually created to help try to think about where our business is going and thinking about organic and inorganic initiatives across the company.
So that was great. I'm glad we went through that because I think there were some great takeaways there that I hope everyone got, which is that this is very much, especially on the content side, if you're going into movies or TV on the production or content side, very pay your dues type business, right? I mean, it's very much about getting your foot in the door, taking that unpaid internship, and it's a controversial thing. There's a lot of talk. I'm from Los Angeles, and it's a lot of talk within the business about whether that's fair or not. But the truth is, it is a reality, and you're probably going to need to take an unpaid internship, so save up your money now to survive that period of your life. Because the thing is, I've heard a lot of stories about people that take unpaid internships, and a lot of times you think it's going to last a year, and they hire you within 3 or 4 months. So if you're doing a really good job, a lot of times you can just get hired before the internship's up. But that is the way that side of the business works. It's less so on the distribution and the wireless and internet side, less so of that kind of culture. So, but on the Hollywood side of the business, that is the culture. So just keep that in mind. And that is, of course, the more seemingly glamorous part. Although there are some really fun jobs, and everybody should remember that on the other sides of the business, there's a lot of fun to be had. You might not be working on TV shows, but those people they get paid pretty well. And there's a lot of fun stuff you can do on that side of the business too. But having said all that, let's get into, and by the way, we're going to take some questions. So be thinking about questions maybe after this next round of what we're going to talk about. We'll try to take some questions, and we'll come back at the end if we have some time and get some. But I wanted to ask the main thing, what are the qualities? The other takeaway, by the way, obviously these guys have switched around different jobs. We're going to talk about that later in a bit. Flexibility is one of the key things you need in this business. Probably in every business these days, but it's more so in this one because it's so, the ecosystem, the whole TV ecosystem is changing, and that's what people have been talking about all day at this conference. So with that in mind, what qualities do you guys all think, and then we'll just go down again, do you think is really necessary for these folks in this room to have right now? What should they be working on right now to be successful in this business amid all of this change?
I think passion, for loving what you're going to be working on is important. I think really honing in your digital skills. I mean, it's really interesting what's going on in the TV business. Is, so much of the content is going to digital platforms. How many of you have a cable subscription? And how many of you are using your parents' password for HBO Go or Net?
You're on camera. HBO's going to come after all of you because you're just
Don't worry, you're not facing the cameras. So, I mean, like everything is really changing, the way people consume content. Yesterday YouTube announced YouTube Red, that's going to be a paid service. Hulu has a service now that doesn't have commercials. So every day there's just news. So I would say really hone up on what's going on in the digital world. I think another thing that you could do that's really helpful is read everything you can. There's so much free content, whether it's multi-channel news. Cablefax isn't free, but there are some stories on there that are free. So you can go on the site. Some is behind a paywall. Broadcasting and Cable, Hollywood Reporter, Deadline. Like there's a million different places. There's The Verge, there's Digiday, there's Business Insider. So you guys should really be reading as much as you can so you can be super knowledgeable about what's going on. And when you go in an interview, you can come up with some kind of pithy thing about, hey, I read about YouTube Red yesterday. So I think you need to study up on digital. I think you need to have a passion for what you want to work on. And those would be the two things I'd say that are really important. Besides study hard and get your degrees.
I would say that you need to be persistent. Like, I think there is a difference between being persistent and being annoying in a way where it's like, know what you want and go after it. But I think that, when you are reaching out to people, let's say, I get people reaching out to me on LinkedIn all the time. And I think that, of course, you can't respond to everybody, but I think that, I will respond to people that I know have taken the time. And they have wrote me an email that makes sense and that there's no grammatical errors. And that seems like, okay, they've read at least my page and they know my background and they're asking specific questions. So I'll take the time to respond. But I think that, I've come across people, that I've interviewed for internships. And it's just basic, little things that people will nitpick. I know, and even sending a thank you note. The little things like that will set you apart, and they will get you to the next round, get you to the next level, get your foot in the door.
That's on paper, by the way. You get a piece of paper, a little pen, and
I mean, it makes a huge difference. I think I've been at Nickelodeon now for almost 4 months, and my boss, she told me, she was like, you know what, Tiffany, you sent me a handwritten note. Nobody sends a handwritten thank you anymore. And that stood out in her mind, so much. And it's something that, she just I interviewed so many people for this role. And, to get a handwritten thank you, she still talks about that. She introduced me in meetings and say, she wrote a hand thank you note, so it goes a long way. But then also picking back off of what Lauren said, I think that, to be passionate about what you want, it's when you go in and you meet with someone, if it's an informational interview, you need to know what their business is. You need to be able to ask valuable questions that's going to lead to a valuable conversation, so you stand out in their mind. They may not have a role available at that particular time, but you never know, 3 months down the road, they might have something like, oh, you know what, I met with so-and-so, and, I want to bring her in, or bring him in. So I think that's very important to focus on the little things that really matter.
I'll say 2 simple things, but they're very important. Not just in the field that I'm in, but learn and develop a thick skin. With TV development, and this isn't to throw you off, but 9 times out of 10 we fail. That's just the nature of the business. It's not, it doesn't mean you're bad at what you do. It's just the way the business works. You're not always going to like the boss you have. You're not always going to like the process. But you just got to stick it through. Conan O'Brien said it, it's so simple. Be kind, work hard. You will get yourself noticed. That is the best thing you do. Act altruistically. Don't act above the job that you're in. I joke around with everybody at DiGa that if my job was to sell shows and scrub the toilets are going to be the shiniest toilets in New York, because you got to believe in what you're doing. The second thing I'd say too, and I think it's tough, especially for your age demographic these days, as things are unstable and things are changing. Learn now how to build your own brand. Think of yourselves as stock. You want to sell the employers on you. So I'd say, not that you have to do so much research into why TV business works and what have you, but learn why things work and don't. Try to keep yourself on the pulse of what's happening. What's the pop culture? What's the trends? Because part of our job is to anticipate a year from now. Not thinking about, the moment I start to say, wow, this is a hot article on BuzzFeed, I've already lost, because it's already in the zeitgeist. And at a time also where, and just to give you an example too, it's daunting sometimes when you're applying for jobs online. Because nowadays, it used to be you walk in with a resume, you talk to someone and you hear back. Now there's competition from all around the country and the world. There are thousands of kids and people that want your spot. So you have to do stuff to make yourself set apart from the rest. The CMT job that I had, I don't know how this happened, I applied online and I got it. So it happens. I promise you it happens. It's a frustrating thing. It's a daunting thing when you're unemployed and you're on unemployment and you're applying to jobs every day and your parents are bothering you because they were of the old process where you walked into an employer, you handed it off a resume. It's not like that anymore. And your parents aren't going to understand, but don't worry. Just be nice to them and they'll figure it out. But those are the two very simple things. Build your own brand and develop a tough skin. That's what I would say.
Wow, okay. I think to add on to the flexibility, the passion, the digital, the brand, I mean, I think there's only two more things I think I would add to that. I think it's when you're in some of these conversations, that's actually building on some of the things that they've already mentioned, is have a perspective. So being educated is part of it, following all some of the trends and everything like that, but don't be afraid to be wrong. If somebody asks you, what do you think about Netflix? Whether it's positive or negative, just have that perspective, because I think it also helps interviewers think about the way that you think about things and the rationale and everything that you can bring. I think the second thing would be, finding mentors or sponsors that can really help you. I feel like that was one of the things I didn't have, so it's always sort of hard when you're kind of going through your career, you don't know where to go in terms of seeking support for growth, development. Am I making the right decision when I'm thinking about considering different roles within the industry, different companies? But to find people that are maybe a few years older than you or have a little bit more experience who can help guide you, I think it's really important to have that as well.
Yeah, that's all great advice. And another thing, I don't know how many people in here were in the last panel, the one on VR, virtual reality, was in there. So yeah, learn everything about that. I mean, really, if you walk into an interview and you've done some research on that, I think they'll be impressed. It's one of those areas of anxiety. Nobody knows what's going to happen with it. As they mentioned in that panel, we had this whole 3D TV fiasco, which everyone thought that was going to be the next great thing, and it just completely fizzled out. So everybody was worried about virtual reality, but I can tell you just from the buzz around where I live in LA, just in that Hollywood community, there are a lot of people looking into it. It's definitely something that I think is going to happen in many different fronts in the next 2 to 5 years. And it's something that if you're going to be graduating in the next 2 years, 3 years, it's a good thing to know about that. So that's just my advice. But do we have any questions? Yeah.
Something I noticed today is that everyone in the business has talked about how they've worked so many. Like it's not just, I worked in Nickelodeon my whole career. Like there's at least 4, and no one's actually old. Like they're all,
Thank you.
So I don't know. Do they tell you
take up a collection?
Do they say like time's up, time to move on? Like how does that happen? How do you fall into all these opportunities? How does it work like that?
I can give you a perspective on that, because actually I was at Fox in a full-time role for a year. I hated the job, because I work with it's true on the creative side, but there's also some really tough personalities type A on the business side as well. And the head of our group would just he would yell at everybody in the group, and it was like I worked crazy hours 7 days a week, and it was just not. I felt like I wasn't really learning and growing, and I left after a year. And then I did consulting work for some other Fox Interactive products without the knowledge of my boss, original boss. But after that, I was actually not working for about a year and a half. I was back down in North Carolina, and I was trying to figure out how to move to New York, and it was an interesting time. It was actually kind of awesome to have that time off. I took some time to travel, but you do kind of have that. You develop some fear because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like getting further and further behind. How am I going to really have an opportunity to get back into it? And the way I got my role in A&E was I actually did apply online, whereas every other interview was through somebody or through networking. I was in that black hole, and I was actually driving up from North Carolina to New York just for something totally separate. And I didn't even have like a suit or anything like that. They called me like, can you come in for an interview and watch? I had to borrow like a friend's suit and everything. I was like way up big and but that's how I ended up at A&E. And I've been at A&E for I guess coming up on 5 years now. And what sort of kept me there is the fact that I have had those opportunities to move into different roles so that I can continuously grow and learn. For me, that was important. For other people, they're really happy being in the same role for 20, 25 years. And A&E is one of those companies, I think, that has a combination of people that are interested in both.
You're very lucky to work for Nancy Dubuque, who's literally one of the best out there, and she just has this kind of, I'm speaking kind of for you, but I think she's created a culture there over many years that allows her, which is so important, because you can have either that culture or you can have like screaming at everyone else, right? There are two ways to do it, and there are different companies that have different styles.
I also think, it used to be people would stay at companies for 25, 30 years or their whole career. And I think that's sort of an old paradigm. People now manage their own careers. And so if I get a resume and I see people have moved around, I don't see that as something bad if they've been trying to manage their career and kind of opportunities. So I think it's more common than it used to be. So that's why I think a lot of people here have had a lot of different opportunities, because I think things are changing. But if you find a place that you love with a culture that fits you, there's no reason not to stay.
And there are a lot of people I know that have been at the same company for 15 years, 20 years. I mean, it does happen, but I think it's the kind of industry where if you want to bounce around, you can, and that's great.
Right.
Yeah, I've moved around a lot, and I'm at my current role now 4 months. I was at A&E prior to Nickelodeon. I was at A&E for 3.5 years, and it is a great place to work, but for me, I needed another challenge. I kind of felt tapped out in my role, and there really wasn't a lot of room for me there to grow. So I moved, and for me, I have the philosophy that, you should always be prepared to move. That's kind of the philosophy that I live by. My mentor told me, Tiffany, you should be interviewing every 6 months, regardless if you were ready to leave or not. Just to kind of get out there, hone your skills, see what skill set you're missing, constantly just talking to people. And that's what I try to live by. Like, even though I may not necessarily be looking for a new role, it's just kind of just to keep it fresh.
And also, just to add on to that, the idea of physically moving, for a job in a different city, that's actually an advantage that all of you have over many people who are maybe older than you and maybe have kids and families. They have other issues to deal with, and it's not as easy a decision for them. So you should be willing to move when something opens up. It puts you at a certain advantage. I mean, I'm assuming, some of you may be married or planning to right when you get out, but most of you probably won't be, and you'll be much more unattached and more able to move around and be flexible. So that's kind of one of the things, I think the greatest advantages that somebody coming in right out of school has over the people who've been there.
All I was going to say was, I remember saying all that negative stuff about development, but that 1 time out of 10 when you succeed, it's a big thing, and that can help set the course for your next gig. So that's why, for me, like, when I went to CMT, I'm a born and raised New Yorker, so if you told me in a room, like, wait, you develop for country music television, I thought of that as a challenge. I had to take the Brooklyn out of me and develop for a regional network. And to me, that was a great resume builder. So that's what justified why I should go there and why. It goes back to the toolbox too. It's you know, if you can say, okay, I worked on certain programming for this channel, or hey, I can be a buyer and a seller and all these things. It's more tools for the toolbox that raises the stock. And you know, Tony, our boss, was at MTV for 20 years. So he's like the last of that generation too that did that. But I've always felt like, for me, even if you're there a year or two or whatever, if you do a nice job, they're going to remember you. And so they're going to tell 3 other people, and that person's going to tell 3 other people. So it's this like constant conversation about yourself if you do well. So I kind of like the idea of, you know, don't overstay your welcome, do the work, do it, work hard. But if you feel like you're ready to take that next step, nothing should hold you back. You should do it.
Anything to add? Any other questions?
This is specifically for Nicole.
Sure.
I worked in LA at a development company, also fell in love with it.
Right.
Eventually wanted to get back in the facet of the industry, but I like what you said about going to the network side and seeing the buyers out. And applying for jobs for the spring, you know, graduating. Do you think that there is something beneficial to going the studio route or the agency route instead of going back into those smaller development companies?
I think it's depending on what you want to do. No matter what, if you go the agency route, production company route, or the network route, you have to start at the assistant level. So if you have a passion for scripted, I'd say it'd be good to get on the agent side, or you know, work with a production company that I'd say knows scripted, or do informational. This is what I always try to do too. Like when I meet with people, you don't have to necessarily ask people for an interview. Just I call it informational, where you want to sit down and tell someone, hey, I want to learn more about what you do or whatever. They're more inclined to give you information because you're not asking for a job. So, you know, that way you can kind of learn who the recruiters are for different networks and companies. You can get in touch with them. You know, I'd say if you want to go scripted, I'd say agency and production company. The networks are a grab bag. They do reality, they do unscripted, they do digital, but no matter what, you have to start at the assistant level. So listen, my idea was I was just going to apply anywhere and everywhere. I knew where I wanted to end up. But I knew I had to start somewhere. So for me, like, I'm not good at art. I'm not an artist whatsoever. But I took a production job in the art department because I was like, okay, even though I'm terrible at this, at least I can learn it and meet someone else. So even though you may have a focus where in your mind, like, I want to be somewhere in 10 years, take any opportunity in front of you, as long as you know it's in the business you want to be in, TV or film or whatever. So.
There are CEOs who are assistants, like 15, 20 years ago. I mean, it's like ridiculous how fast you can move up on the content side of the business. Any other?
So I have a fairly simple question. I work a lot of internships in this field, communication, radio, and broadcast journalism. So I've worked an internship with CBS News, and now I'm working an internship with a small company that runs social media for the department. And I was just wondering, like, does it look bad on your resume to have worked, like, is there an age limit on internships? Like, is there a point where you should stop trying to look for an internship and just focus on trying to find a job? And if you still work at an internship when you're like 25 or 26, even if it's paying, does that look bad? Or like, not bad, but is that like, is it like, you know, like the company wonder why you still working at an internship and why did you get a full-time position?
I don't think so.
If you're getting paid, first, if you're in an internship, if you're getting paid, that's basically a job. So don't look at it, you know, because there's a lot of internships that aren't getting paid, and those are really internships.
Yeah.
So you're ahead of the game, you know, doing that. If you've graduated and you have some of these internships, then I think it's a nice time to try to package that up and then see if you can get that next entry level job. And again, it might be starting as an assistant. I mean, when I graduated, I'm a little older than these guys, I didn't want to be an assistant. You know, now there is no way to get into this business, I think, without being an assistant. That is just the deal. So, I mean,
It's like a hazing process, I mean, honestly. They all had to go through it. They want you to go through it.
Right.
Because they had to go through it. It's just like.
and then see if you have what it takes to, like, if you can answer phones and do all these little details, then they'll, you know, find a role for you down the road.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, it's like that level of detail that you have to learn to be such a detail-oriented person, because you have people, very high-powered people, who are asking you to do a gazillion things and work long hours and keep track of so many things and be so organizational that those skills actually, if you're good at it, it proves that you can do pretty much anything.
Yeah.
And really, if you can handle being an assistant at some of these companies for an extended period of time, you're pretty much going to be great in your role. And they know that. I mean, it's like a testing period, you know?
Plus, I think it looks better on your resume probably to be working these internships than to not be doing anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my intern now, she's 27 years old, and you know she gets paid, but there's no age limit. It's like, you know, she had the passion, and she had the ability to want to learn the skill set. And I mean, our intern is not, you know, answering phones and stuff. She's doing real work. I mean, real reports. She's a member of the team, and you know, she's not there every day. She's there like 3 days a week, but you know, she's still a valuable part of our team in the way that, you know, we look at projects. And so we try to, you know, when we bring interns in, I think it's like, you know, we don't want them sitting there doing nothing. It's like, you know, literally the first day they get there, it's like, here you go, here's your project. You know, we need to be back now. So it's a very, don't get discouraged at all.
It's really look at all those things that you've been doing in all those internships, and again, package it up into, you know, a through line of why you'll be valuable to a company.
Yeah.
Yeah, these days companies, they look at each employee, you know, how's that employee bringing value to the company? That's exactly right. Yes?
Question is from Tony. So you mentioned that you never had a mentor. And so how has that helped affect your decision making within this industry? And did that help influence your decision in taking the year and a half off?
Well, I think part of it was that, you know, I came out of business school with like this really high expectation of, you know, what I wanted out of my job. I was really excited and passionate about entering the industry. And when I got there, you know, the culture of the group I was in was just, you know, very different from what I expected. So that was really hard for me, but I didn't really know how to get out of it. I didn't know really who to talk to either about the situation I was in. And that's what I meant by not having someone, you know, to help me think about, okay, should I just, you know, suck it up and just stay here, you know, and continue to be miserable, or try to, you know, just leave. And at the end of the day, I made that decision to leave. And then I kind of was sort of in this period where I was doing some consulting work, as I mentioned, and then I took that time off, and it was really about trying to figure out what I wanted personally. So one of the big decisions, there was a couple of different decisions I was making when I was in business school, you know, whether to go on the creative side or the business side. Because on the creative side, as has been discussed, it's much more of an apprenticeship model. So the value of your education, especially if you've got a graduate degree, does not help. So that's one. The other piece was, if you're looking into the media industry, really at that time was really LA versus New York. So where do I want to be geographically? So I had made that decision after LA that I really wanted to be on the East Coast, because I grew up on the East Coast. Most of my family and friends were out here. So I had sort of targeted my focus on New York, and at that time, you know, there's a very specific sort of role that I was looking for. So that made it a little bit more challenging as well. And so I tapped into the network that I had, but I never really had people above me to be like, here's, you know, how you should think about crafting your story, how you should build your brand. Here are the types of opportunities you should look at, and here's other people that you can connect with who can find out. And that's sort of where I was going with that. But now that I've been at A&E, I've learned the value of that, and hopefully as a manager myself now, I'm giving sort of those opportunities to people that work under me, and I'm a lot more cognizant about that. And I see a lot more people reaching out to seek those types of resources, because I do think it's important. I think, and other people have had that, but not everybody, I think, has benefited from it. So.
Yeah, well, we have about 5 minutes. We're going to take, just to let everyone know, we have about 5, so we'll take some more questions. We actually had some other things we were going to talk about, but I think we hit on many of them from the questions. You guys sort of predicted what we were going to talk about anyway, but go ahead.
Hi, my name is Raven. So my question, I guess, would be really helpful for seniors. For us, those of us who are looking for jobs and need to graduate, how do you go about networking or reaching out to people but like being persistent and not being annoying, as well as like not contacting them in hopes for a job, so they don't feel like, oh, you just emailed me for a job. Like, actually creating that genuine relationship with people.
Are you from Pace or where?
I'll go to Syracuse.
You go to Syracuse?
Yeah.
I think Syracuse has, I was saying this earlier at the lunch, it has a really great alumni network. So I really tap into that alumni network. I think here in New York,
LA and
Los
New York,
Angeles.
alumni like mixers and
Yes,
happy hours,
there's
and all, every
tons.
school out there.
So I would just really tap into that and be, and do your research, find, this group of people, find out, let's say he's from New Syracuse, I don't know. But you're like, oh, I love that show you created at CMT, and now what you're doing with Scream, it's awesome. So you know him, and he's going to be like, hey, I'll talk to her, because she didn't just send some blind, response and say, hey, we're both, from Syracuse, so I thought you could take some time. Say if I could take like 20 minutes of your time, whatever, and make sure you're flexible to their schedule. Do not, if they say, this is the only time I can make it, figure out how you can make that meeting.
One of the things somebody told me, incidents that I totally use all the time, was that when I reach out to the online network, somebody told me that people love to talk about themselves and they love to give advice. So that's what I wrote. I'm like, hey, I'm interested in media, and get to know a little bit about them based on maybe their experiences, wherever, and then be like, look, I'd love to spend 20 minutes learning more about how you got into the position, and your background experiences, and also any advice you have for me. And people love talking about those two things, and that way it doesn't look like it's like, oh, I'm looking for a job. It's sort of a back.
It's just funny. The funniest thing about the media and entertainment business is that some famous person said this, nobody knows anything. You talk about like 9 out of 10 things failing. It's because nobody knows what's going to take off. There's no way, you can't do focus groups. Nobody knows. It's just this weird zeitgeist thing. Like Breaking Bad becomes this huge show. Nobody knew that or predicted it going on. And even like The Walking Dead or something that's based on a comic book. It's like they based other things on pre-existing IP, and a lot of them don't take off. It's still a 9 out of 10 type of proposition. So it's like nobody knows anything, but everybody kind of pretends like they know it. So they love talking about themselves and how much they know about the business and predicting the future and all that. So that's actually really good advice. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, Reagan, also Pace University. Every time I hear people from the media business talk about, that their work, they always mention the struggle, like, oh, you have to do this, do that, sort of groundwork. I was just wondering if you guys can all remember how long it took before you realized it was all worth it. Like, this is what I need to be doing, instead of what maybe I should try a different field.
I'd say, for me, I always knew it was going to be worth it. We're not curing cancer, we're making TV. My job is to entertain people. That's the best gig in the world. They're paying me to do that. So for me, like whatever I had to deal with on the side or the struggle to get there, I knew there was an end game. There are going to be times where you're going to look at yourself like, why am I driving a car with a director's dog in the back seat, taking him to go get a bordello shot? Which makes no sense. It's not like my job description. Well, you just do it. You just do it because this may end up helping me later on, and pet the dog and go on your way and go to the doctor. So I always did, and I also felt like this is gonna be a great story for my memoir one day. So just think of it that way. Like there are great. It's personality building too. Like these struggles are gonna like. At first, when I was developing and not knowing what I was doing, I was getting mad because everybody hated my ideas. No one's gonna like your ideas. You gotta convince them that they're good ideas. So I developed that tough skin. So like that struggle, you're gonna know through time and experience. So don't be afraid. There are gonna be days where you're like, I don't want to do this, or you get in bed like, I don't want to be in this business anymore. That will change within 10 minutes when you get to the office and you figure something out that's cool, and you think, oh, now I know why I'm doing it. But yeah, that's what I would say. Like it's in my mind, like there was no other option because I loved it so much. I had to make it work because I was not going to go home and say I was a failure and I failed myself. That was what I was in my mind. That's what I'm constantly thinking about. So.
Yeah, it's like that content side of the business is kind of the fun part, right? Because you're dealing with the fun shows and everything, but there's a price to pay for that. There are more unpaid internships on that side of the business. you're driving your boss's dog around in the car and stuff like that. But honestly, that stuff, generally on the distribution side, the technology side of the business, it's run more like Procter & Gamble. It's like you're working at more of a normal type company. When you're working at these production companies in the Hollywood side of the business, it's totally different. I mean, it's still very professional and all that in many ways, not every way, but in many ways, but there's a little bit more looseness like that as to your job responsibilities and how that's all defined. So.
It's a test also, too. It's to see if you can help.
I think the struggle is part of the excitement, though.
Yes.
I feel like I'm still there, and I'm like, I'm in this new role, I keep moving around, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm really supposed to do now in my new role. But that's part of what makes it really exciting, because there was nothing that existed before that, and we're just trying to navigate these murky waters right now in our ecosystem that's changing so dynamically and so quickly right now. And, I could go to Procter & Gamble and have a normal job, but then, it's kind of boring. I don't know. I mean, I think it's very structured, and it depends on your personality too. If you want that growth, change, and you want to go in there, and there's some excitement in it too.
You guys all kind of have these great. You guys are still having a great career. But you guys worked on some pretty big networks and TV shows. And for someone like myself who is kind of torn between TV and film, I really love filmmaking and directing and cinematography, but I also love TV, and I'm not exactly sure how to distinguish which career path I want to take. And do you think that it's something that I need to determine now, or I can just kind of see where the wind goes?
I think this is the golden age of television. So, I mean, a lot of people in film are moving into television. There's so much beautiful, amazing content being created, not just for TV, for the over-the-top, so for Hulu and Amazon with Transparent, Netflix, all of the shows. So there's so many options. So if you know you want to be a director, then take that path, and then, I think you'll find where you want to go in that.
By the way, though, just understand, and I think this is generally true, maybe not always true, on the content side of the business, which is from both. There are a billion places now, there's so many shows, so many of them are so good, and everyone wants to be working for them. It has split the audiences, and what that has done is split, for people that rely on advertising, those rates have gone down. So the budgets for these individual shows over time have gone generally down. So the money to pay people who work on those shows has also gone down. So sometimes, it's a little bit of a money issue too. I mean, that's part of the price you might pay in some cases. There are definitely people who make a ton of money on TV, and they generally are the people that have an ownership stake, or they have points on the back end and stuff like that, because there's this whole syndication market, there's selling stuff to Netflix and stuff like that. But if you're kind of in the middle level or at the front end, you're probably going to have, you might have to take, these days more so than say 10, 15 years ago if you were breaking into TV, because there were fewer shows, and they commanded higher advertising rates because the ratings per show were higher. People generally, the salaries might have been a little bit higher back then. So that splitting everything across is, creating that effect. There's only so much pool of money to go around to everybody. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and that isn't something necessarily that's hit on the distribution side or the technology side, although those are tough businesses too that have their challenges, and there's a lot of consolidation going on right now. So that sometimes can be bad for the number of jobs that are available, et cetera. But I know it's interesting, like on distribution versus programming. I just know anecdotally, I've never worked for either because I've always been more or less a journalist covering the whole business, but I've had a lot of friends who have been on both sides. Anecdotally what I hear is that they tend to make more money on the distribution side for the same role that you would have on the programming side. And that's partly because sometimes the programming side is more fun, so you're sort of, you're getting paid more to do fewer fun things on the distribution side. So it's something that everyone needs to think about. It's like, are you more interested in, how much money you make, or kind of the day-to-day, what is your passion? And what is fun? For a lot of people, their passion is numbers or finance or things that may seem on the surface boring, but they can actually be more interesting and fun than you think. A lot of people on the distribution side have nothing to do with creating content. Get to travel a lot. They get to stay in nice hotels, go to a lot of nice dinners. There's salespeople that can be a lot of fun if you're an outgoing person, and you're meeting with clients clients a lot, and a lot of people love that type of stuff, and that's a huge part of this business. So there's all kinds of different angles you can go in on, and that's kind of the cool thing I think about this whole media, whatever we're calling it, cable
Yeah.
media, I don't know, it's everything. But I think we're pretty much on it.
Here. Yeah.